Latin inscriptions over the windows. I'll tell you about them later. And before the Second World War, you had a veranda out here with a metal canopy. I think those marks, I don't know, but those marks there on the wall might have been connected with that. But that was taken down in the war because of scrap metal effort. Mr. Scargill, the person who had this house built, laid out the grounds. So these grounds are very similar to how he would have laid it out. So he had a fountain and rose beds. Trees are his age, most of them are his age, yes, they were laid out in his time. And the original books here are all the books that he laid out, or were laid out when he had the house in the 1870s. The books, some of the books further down the park were put in by the council when it was turned into a park. You would have approached it either up on Bedford Road if you were Durban, that's all in my place now. Or if you were carriage trade, you would come up the New Bedford Road. You could drive your carriage under the arches here. Notice the carved figureheads round there. I'll tell you about them when we're inside, I think. And if you look just up and over, you can see some more half timbering and some more carved plaster up there. Above the balcony. Yeah, I've got a list, that's right, I've got a list of who they are. Gladstone is the one round there. Dickens was on the other side. There's Palmerston, Bright and a number of other people. I'll go into them in detail, but Gladstone and Dickens are the only ones I can immediately recognise.
Disraeli.
Yeah.
Disraeli was around.
Yeah, sorry, Disraeli. There's Disraeli, Gladstone and Dickens. And I can't recognise them. Go on to look yourself. I can't remember which way round my little list goes. And you can see another Latin inscription on the window.
Years we've come down here.
Yes. That's Rumble, the house is. It was built in 7 stages, and it's a whole jungle of different roof heights and slightly different styles. He actually built the back part first, although this is an extension. So this is the bit that the museum put on. He built the back part first, and then he built the front part. And they're not quite the same level, and you can actually go up in the museum and up to the attics and out onto the roof and look out towards Wooden Hills. And then we come down towards the stable block. You have to imagine on the right hand side greenhouses all the way along. We've got a photograph of them. He did have some hot houses with the house, and then later the council gardeners used the greenhouses. Scargill's house. And on the doorknob, his initials, Frank Dickens Scargill, here. Then, if we come in,
How do you want one? So you can actually sell that thing, and that looks brand new. Like anywhere, the great big waterproof cover over it. £15, and I said to John, very cheap. Babies are 10 years together.
Yeah, it's true.
You've got a story.
nice timber work. The billiard room would have been here. Upstairs. None of us quite know how this building worked because there aren't very good plans of it. And one of the electricians was drilling upstairs through the floor to put some wiring in. And you know how usually in a house you have timbers and floorboards laid out over timbers, so you've got a gap between your upstairs and downstairs. Well, we very quickly realised that in this house, in this spot, we don't have that, because he drilled through the floor upstairs to get to what he thought would be cavity, and the drill came out through the ceiling. So that's just one of the things you find in a very old house. And then round where this little room is where the rat man sits over, and it would have been the smoking room.
I suppose it symbolises something. Batman, I suppose he was one that killed the rats and everything. Batman? And the tribute to him. This is what it might be characteristic.
Well, it is a good thing, isn't it? Yes. I think there may have been, yes. I mean, we've got Dobson windows. Of course, there were bay windows out there, and there is a window along here that you can see from the side. Sorry? I don't know. I don't think so. That would have been interesting, wouldn't it? Yes, I don't know. So you're in the smoking room here, and then we'll go back through. And the next timbered ceiling you can see is in what the gallery that's got the lace in now, and it would have been the library. And it has a bay window as well. So the bay window is where that little raised platform is, and the curtains. So you have to put it up, but the library would have got the sun in the morning. And then
the mouldings.
Mouldings original. Oh, the mould. That's bits of wood in the collection. I don't think they're connected with the house. But of course, the timber beams and the wooden ceiling are.
So the floor above?
Well, we don't know. We didn't drill through here, so I don't know. And then, what's now the art gallery? We won't go over this end. It was the front bit of it, from here on, was the drawing room.
Oh, they're good for the children to do.
This end, you can see as you go past, you can see
My mother's wedding photos with these pretty hair
This end would have been shuttered off, it would have been wooden shutters to draw, wooden doors to draw. And this was the morning room, and there is a bay window on the outside here. So just have a look as we go past, and we're going here.
Have a look
at the fantastic ceilings here. This would have been the dining room for the house. And I'll just go and get the keys to open the room where we can sit down. Council workmen repainted this ceiling for us, and it's very much colours of the period, although we don't know whether they were the colours of the time. I think they did a really fantastic job. And we've got little bits of original panelling and moulding here. I'll just get the key for this room. Celebrating also the times and nearly all right. We do have to move with the times, and I'm afraid that we really needed an education room for all the school visits, which is what this is.
No, yes, I know you use it as a children's room, don't you?
Yeah.
During the holidays.
It would have been a sort of servery for the dining room just across there. There were also kitchens. You have more than one kitchen. Now, I hope you don't mind me bringing you inside, but I thought it was better than standing out in the rain. And we can have a look and see whether we want to go and explore the rest of the park afterwards. Now, when Mr. Howe's house, the little stucco cottage which stood here, was sold, it was offered by auction at the George Hotel on George Street, Monday, August the 25th in 1862, and it was described as an eligible family residence pleasantly situated between the old and new Bedford Roads, Luton. The new Bedford Road had opened in 1832. There's a kitchen, cellar, entrance hall, drawing, dining, breakfast room, 6 bedrooms and a water closet on the first floor. That's right. It was very well fitted up with every requisite for a respectable family. And along with it went 2 cottages, a stable, a chaise house for the coach, loft and out premises, about 2.5 acres of meadowland, and about 1 acre of garden. It said the hall is freehold and offers an opportunity for occupation or investment that rarely occurs in the neighbourhood. Now, that could have been written today, and it would be if this house came up for sale, but that was 1862, so estate agent speak hasn't really changed much. How much did it go for? Have you got that? I don't have how much it went for, no. No, I don't have how much it went for then, but I can tell you how much this house cost to build. Frank Chapman Scargill bought the estate in 1868. So don't ask me what happened between 1862 and 1868, because I don't know, or whether it had to be offered again, whether it didn't actually sell at that point. He demolished the existing white stucco building and built the present mansion in 2 stages, as I said. The first stage was a kitchen wing at the back, which is what we're sitting in, and then the rest of the house. He also built the lodges that you see on Old Bedford Road, and one out near the corner of the cricket ground-ish, and Pope's Meadow Lodge, and the lodge by the New Bedford Road entrance. A gardener's cottage, pumping house, and a pumping house. There were, in the corner, the Stockingstone Road corner, it was osier beds, those were reeds, and they were used for weaving baskets. So it was very boggy, very muddy soil around here. He built this house for £10,000. He gradually bought the rest of the land that make up the park today from Mr. Crawley from Stockwood House. And the architect who built this house was called Thomas Sorby. He was born near Wakefield, but he went to work in London. And he built a number of county court buildings, including those in Leeds, Halifax and Barnsley. And he also built Bromley Town Hall. Here he built the Durler Mansion, which is Whitehills, up off London Road. It's the same architect. Within 8 years of completing this building, he emigrated to Canada and he went on to be a designer, architect for the Canadian Pacific Railway. And he actually built the courthouse in Vancouver, and he died in Victoria, British Columbia in November 1924. Now Victoria, British Columbia is where I grew up, and I actually remember one of the buildings he built in Victoria, but I only found out that who he really was after I started working here. It's just an amazing coincidence. The building's now Grade 2 listed, so it's one of the few listed buildings in Luton, and it was completed in 1877 as the date over the archway of the stables. And as I said, it had billiard room, smoking room, drawing room, dining room, 2 kitchens, a dairy, laundry, cellars, which are down below, which we use for museum storage. There was 1 for beer, 1 for apples, a boot room, a game larder, schoolroom, conservatory, which was out at the back here, a boudoir, 4 dressing rooms, 4 toilets, 3 bathrooms, this is in 1877 mind you, and a number of rooms for servants. His house had 16 bedrooms, and they now comprise the first floor of the museum and the second floor, which was the servants' quarters. It was described in 1875 as being a short distance from Luton. The walls will be faced with strawberry-coloured brick peculiar to Luton, which is the Luton Greys. Dressings to the window of red Mansfield stone. Carriage, portico, cornices and chimney caps are in moulded red brick, and the material comes from near Norwich for them. The roofs are covered in tiles from Colebrookdale, around where the Iron Bridge Gorge Museum is, and ridges and knobs from Maidenhead. The whole of the ground floor is laid out with concrete, and the first floor partially with iron joists and concrete, and partially with wrought pitch pine. All the floors finished with wood blocks of different patterns in different rooms. So some of the, we've got pitch pine, oak and walnut, a pitch pine on the staircase and oak. On the first floor there were 10 bedrooms, 4 dressing rooms, 3 bathrooms, 3 water closets, linen and housemaids' closets, and rooms for servants, and lumber in the attics. Every room had a ventilation brick in the walls, so it was well ventilated. So quite a grand estate.
Did it have electricity?
Sorry?
Did it have electricity?
It did, I think, yes. Now, for Frank Chapman Scargill himself, he was born in 1836 or 37. He came to Luton in his late 20s, and by 1864 he was articled to a local solicitor. He set up his own solicitor's practice in King Street, Luton. It appears he was on the Board of Health and quite a few organisations. He married somebody called Elizabeth Kennedy on 27th of October 1868 at Christ Church in Luton. And Luton's always quite a lively place, and this wedding was really no exception. Description of the wedding, which appeared in the Luton News, said, "On Tuesday morning there was a remarkable scene at Christ Church. By 10 o'clock or soon after, crowds wended their way to the church in the hope of witnessing the marriage which was about to be performed there. In and around the church, the crowding was very great. Probably not less than 4,000 persons were collected by the time the bridal party arrived. Inside the church, during the ceremony, the conduct of a large portion of the crowd of spectators was most unbecoming." They stood on the tops of the pews, some of which were broken, and seats were smashed and panels forced out. Stout gas standard was broken, and it is to be regretted better order was not kept, but the inrush of spectators was so great as to be entirely unmanageable. And it describes the church as neatly decorated with evergreens. The bride wore a blue silk dress, white tulle bonnet and veil. Bridesmaids, white silk dresses, scarlet wreaths and tulle veils. At the conclusion of the ceremony, the party returned to the residence of Mr. Heel to breakfast. In the evening, a select circle of the friends of the bridegroom were entertained at Birmingham, and this closed the festivities for the day. His house was called Birmingham Shop, just like Richard Howe's house had been. Now, Elizabeth was quite unusual because she'd been married before and she brought 3 children with her. Then they had 4 children, although the youngest son died only a couple of months old. And one of the birth certificates has the address of the Green family brewers on. They lived just a little bit further down Old Bedford Road, and it looks as though that Scargill stayed with them while this house was being built. Eventually, Elizabeth died, and Frank Scargill inherited £5,800, which is quite a lot of money in 1899. Shortly afterwards, he moved to Ireland and married his second wife. He was 66 and she was 23, and they had 9 more children. The last one born in 1917. Frank died in 1919, and he's buried in County Killarney. In 1996, Jasper Scargill, who was the son of Frank Scargill, one of the last of the children to be born, came to Wardown House. And he remembered his father as rather flamboyant, and the family crest appeared on horses' bridles, 20 settings of crested silver and monogrammed dinner plates. It was interesting to realise that Frank Scargill was born in 1836, towards the end of the reign of William IV, and a year before Queen Victoria was born, came to the throne. He lived throughout her reign, and that of her son Edward VII, well into the reign of George V, and right through the First World War. That was quite an impressive period of history. As we've seen, the portico at the front of the house can shelter visitors. The tradesman's driveway was up from Old Bedford Road. The busts over the porch are Palmerston, Dickens, Cobden, Bright, Disraeli and Gladstone. And I had a look to see whether there was anything that could connect them historically, and couldn't find anything at all. Palmerston was Prime Minister from 1855 to 58, and 59 to 65. Charles Dickens lived from 1812 to 1870. Richard Cobden from 1804 to 65, and he was a politician and leader of the movement that repealed the Corn Laws. And then Bright, 1811 to 1889, he was also a politician, and Disraeli, of course, was a politician. Prime Minister from 1837, then 1868, and then 1874 on. And Gladstone, of course, was a politician and Prime Minister, but other than that, most of them, except for Dickens, were politicians, and you could argue that that Dickens wrote quite politically motivated material in his novels. There's nothing else to connect them. So I don't know. We don't know whether he chose, whether there was a sort of pattern book that you could choose the decorative trimmings for your house, and that was in fashion at the time. There are other houses. There's the Maltings, the oldest bit of the Maltings buildings in Victoria Street and St Albans has busts on it that are very similar. Round the side, actually on Victoria Street, there's doctor surgery now, but we don't know. And the Rat Man, we've not come across anything similar anywhere. So if you ever spot it on another building, do tell us. Anyway, so on the side where the library, the morning room and the dining room are, you get the rising sun. and you get the evening sun on the other side. You might have noticed from the car park, if you park just across from the museum, there's a little wire fence, and then there's two gravestones, headstones. There, one of those certainly is from the family, the Scargill family dog. The other might be a dog, or it might be a horse's grave. We don't know. Eventually, after Mr. Scargill moved away to Ireland, the property was let to B.J.H. Forder, who was owner of a brickmaking firm. He changed the house to Wardown House, the name of the house to Wardown House. He then let the house to one of his business partners, who was Haley Stewart, who became the first chairman of the London Brick Company. And when the lake was being enlarged by the council, the London Brick Company and Haley Stewart put in a bid to get the job, and they got it. By 1890, a letter from land agents and auctioneers describes the house in detail. We have a stabling, coach house for 6 carriages, 6 loose boxes, loft and coachman's rooms, turret and clock. So that would be where the cricket pavilion is now. A chaff culling house, asphalted stable yard with carriage gates. The outbuildings was a cow house for 6 cows, another cow house for 6 cows with a loft over, bullock pens for 10 bullocks, gardener's cottage, loose box for 2 horses, brick dogs' kennels, mess house with copper and range, 3 loose boxes for 2 horses each, a range of piggeries and cow sheds, workshops, cricket pavilion, a low-storey brick and slated building, one part fitted with an engine by Hayward and Tyler and Company, the other asphalted for coach house or barn, and a cattle fold. Kitchen garden enclosed by brick walls and well stocked. I think that might have been behind here, but I'm not sure. 2 vineries, 2 greenhouses, 2 forcing pits, all heated by hot water pipes, potting sheds and stoke hole, and then pleasure grounds, and 3 lodges. It extolled its position 1 short mile from Luton and not far from the Midland and Great Northern branch lines, and the time into London was 40 minutes then. And it says it was approached by 2 carriage drives. We've talked about the inside. Offices on ground floor, spacious, light and commodious. You had a housekeeper's room, servants' hall, butler's pantry, kitchen, scullery, storeroom, laundry and ironing room. And then it mentions 4 lodges. And it was described as being fitted with electric bells throughout, speaking tubes where necessary, heated by hot water, and very, very desirable. It was sold finally on the 23rd of June 1903 for £15,500, which is equivalent to a 1993 value of £542,810. So probably £1 million by now. It was brought by 3 local businessmen who probably expected to make a quick profit. There's James Swain Ellis, who was a coal merchant, Richard Burley, who was a hat manufacturer, and Alfred Rance, who was a builder. But the deal took some time to complete, and by the time it's completed, Alfred Rance decided he didn't want to be involved. It was put up for auction at an asking price of £17,000. And an offer was made for the house and 11 acres of land by a religious house in nuns from France, but that sale fell through. And we've got a map in the museum where it's all divided off into plots, and they tried to sell it individually for building as separate plots, but they couldn't manage to do that. And 2 local councillors, Aisha Hucklesby and Edwin Oakley, saw the potential, and they bought the house for £16,000. They managed to convince the council that they should buy it. So the council eventually bought it, and Luton News really helped. They had a great sort of campaign. Council eventually bought it for the same price in 1904. when the acquiring Wardown was actually put to the ratepayers meeting, only 30 were in favour, and the objections were it was too far out of town and it was bogland, not worth having. But the Luton News argued it should be a public park. So Aisha Hucklesby, who was mayor at the time, formally opened the park, and in her speech she looked forward to a time when the house would be able to hold a museum. The park was immediately popular, but the house was more of a problem. It was neglected and it had dry rot and it was decaying. And it was used as a military convalescent home in World War I. Out on the roof, I was telling you, you can actually go out onto the roof. Well, there is a way out onto the roof. There's actually graffiti on the walls by the roof that the soldiers here during the First World War had scribbled. But after the end of the war, the rooms were rented out to council employees, gardeners and such, and the ground floor had a tea room. So it was very underused, really. And at the end of the war, when First World War, when some of the Zeppelin Raids started, one local councillor said that the Wardown House was a real white elephant, no good to anybody, and he hoped that one of the Zeppelin Raids would come and bomb it. One of the other councillors pointed out that they haven't bothered insuring it because it was such a white elephant, so as if it was bombed they wouldn't get any money at all. So fortunately it wasn't bombed. And eventually in 1931 it became a museum. Or a couple of rooms downstairs became a museum, and it was used as a school for evacuees during the Second World War. The park itself had numerous openings. So 7th of July 1905 there was a garden party for councillors who enjoyed the upper grounds of the park. 70 people came to the buffet. They played tennis, bowls, etc. And then the 8th of July, the Mansion and Formal Gardens opened in 1905. And the mayor at the time explained that the park wasn't yet complete, so you could only throw open the lawns and pleasure grounds. It opened gates onto New Bedford Road and asked people to report anybody damaging anything. He hoped people would enjoy the park, but on the Sunday, apparently, there was a big storm and youth stole some of the flowers. Then the 12th of April 1906, it was unofficially opened, and there were 30,000 visitors in 1 week. It was unofficially opened, all the lower bit, the park that we know, because the Mayor Hucklesby was ill, so he couldn't come. So finally, the 7th of May 1906, Aisha Hucklesby came and opened it. He opened the park gates, which would have been at the other end of the park going onto New Bedford Road, and the whole park was railed. It lost its railings during the Second World War, some of them it still had. And mounted on each of the main gates was a large copper medallion, which has since disappeared. Now, you may have noticed that there's building work going on in the park, and that's because it's got, as you probably know, it's got Heritage Lottery Fund money to restore some of the features. Not everything's coming back, but they're going to replant some of the trees that are getting quite old, so replant it. Some of you may remember the sort of the drinking fountain, which disappeared in 1995. They're not putting back a drinking fountain that looks just the same, but they are putting in a water feature. One of the things they weren't able to afford, unfortunately, was bandstand. So, as far as I know, you're not getting the bandstand back. Now, do people want to hear a bit about the park in here, or do you want to go for a walk?
What's the weather like?
It looks... Are you all right here for a bit longer, and then we'll go for a walk? Right. Before the council opened the park with all these openings in 1905 and 1906, it spent £6,000 laying out the park. So it made the lake. There was a little pond, one Frank Scargill had the house, but it laid out a bigger lake. It provided a bandstand, which was used during the First World War, certainly, and later, bridges, the boathouse, a new bowling green, which you can still see today, and a cricket pitch. So it refreshed it. As I said, Mr. Scargill actually did have a cricket pitch. Now, Councillor Stadden objected to spending money on the extensions to the lake, as it was a low priority, and he said that the park was a willful waste of public money. But he later did apologise and say it was a very nice park. Councillor Atwood doubted the big lake would hold water. As you can see, it does hold water. However, a vote was passed to have the lake, and the lake was enlarged, as I said, by the London Brick Company and Stuart B. It had a maximum depth of 4 foot, and 2 deeper areas were once used for swimming. There was a diving board at one end, and boats and a boathouse built. Cricket ground relaid, walls constructed, gates hung, plants planted, etc. So by 1904, the 2 lagoons were added for swimming and bathing and changing hut. All the paths that we see up near the top end of the park are just like they were when they were laid out by Mr. Scargill. And the trees, the giant redwoods and the lime trees were there then. But we're missing the water fountains and railings along the edge of the park. The redwoods, firs, beech and horse chestnuts were planted between 1870 and 90, so they would have been planted by Mr. Scargill. And the brick wall on New Bedford Road, which is some of the only surviving brick for the walls around the park, must have been built, we think, when this house was built, because it's the same kind of brick and some of the patterns are the same. And they had short decorated railings, which went during World War II, except for one panel near the pedestrian entrance in New Bedford Road, which probably had a notice board on it, so it didn't go during the war. The bowling green was certainly open for the opening of the park, and by 1910 there were 2 bowling greens. Tennis courts were there by 1924, and mini golf and crazy golf sometime after 1924. That's as precise as I can be. Some of you may remember, I don't know, I wouldn't. The summer house was built when the top lawns are laid out, and it's out just over there, and it's boarded, it's got railings around it now, while they renovate it. And the boathouse that we've got now probably wasn't the original one. We've got photographs of people bathing and children paddling. One of the boats was called Saucy Jane, one of the original boats, and it used to turn turtle quite often. So there are accounts in the paper of it turning over and dipping Edwardian boaters. Donkey Wheel was donated in 1932, came from Kensworth. The drinking fountain by the lower lagoon near the New Bedford Road entrance, probably working until 1921, and it was destroyed by vandals in 1995. The Daisy Chain Walk, which is all boarded up at the moment, but it goes between the lower park and the upper park, and it goes along to Old Bedford Road, was so called because it's got motifs of daisies implanted in the wall, and they're renovating it at the moment, so it's not very visible. And of course, the bandstand was used until the Second World War and stood on the New Bedford Road side, and you can see that it's just flat land where it stood now. And there was children's playground went in the 60s.
It was still going when we came. That was 1958.
Was it? Yeah.
I could hear it from the car.
Yeah.
Down.
Yeah. And apparently in 1965 they looked at renovating it, and the council decided they couldn't afford it, so they tried to sell it to St Albans Council, who didn't buy it, and it was scrapped. It's a shame, isn't it?
People roller skated it.
Yes. Oh, really? God. And then near the present fountain in the lake, the memorial fountain to the young boy that died, there's a flat piece of land where the tank, First World War tank stood, and that's roughly around there is where the water feature is going to go in. Then there was another stage during the Second World War, which is the lower car park off Old Bedford Road, At the end of it was a big sort of bandstand theatre kind of building, and that was used for the holidays at home entertainment during the Second World War.
Remember that?
Yeah. And if you were
My
lucky,
daughter used to go, didn't you?
Saturday mornings used to go.
and if you were lucky, you might, as a child, yes, you might have come to the Saturday morning entertainment and shows for the children, or you might have heard the Luton Girls Choir, and by that time the Luton Girls Choir was very, very popular, and it didn't perform very much in Luton. It went all over the place, but not so often in Luton. So there were long lineups to hear them, and we've got some photographs of them actually performing there. The weather wasn't always good for the Wednesday and Friday concerts. And one performer said that Wardown Park should be renamed Pourdown Park, which might be appropriate for today. Over the years, the park's been used for all sorts of things. So that we had the Sweet Pea Society, Band of Hope, Temperance Society, Easter Bonnet Parade in the 50s, and then of course last year, Carnival, band concerts on Sunday afternoons and evenings. In 1912 there was a proposal to have a cinema here in the park, and the council actually said yes to that, and the council would get £10 per month of profits, and it was due to run from May to September, but they found it was too expensive to put the electricity in, so that didn't happen. The park was a destination for the monkey parade, which is where you might go courting. People walked out from George Street, Manchester Street, Mill Street, out to here. Probably some people walked along as far as New Bedford Road to listen to the band and then walk back into town. And one writer describes the monkey parade as a kind of marriage bureau on legs, efficient and cheap dating agency. Participants, washed and dressed in the Sunday best, strolled slowly backwards and forth for 2 or 3 hours. Usually there were little groups of 5 or 6 youths. The girls seldom exceeded 2 or 3, and never singly, unless they did not care about their reputation. To refresh my memory, I asked my contemporaries about their memories of the monkey parade. They all knew about it and remember it, yet, do you know, not one admitted to taking part in it. Like, you're there. Yeah, so where did you look? Which way did
Right
you look?
from, I'll say, but Park Street, more or less, right down George Street to the town centre, right up to here, and then you go back again, and then you might do it again. Oh, there was spikes on the bridge, people would be tossed over it. Oh, yeah, I've been to that. I've done something exciting in my life.
Well, this writer said that when he asked people where they'd met their husbands and wives, they said in church or chapel. And he also goes on to comment that swimming in the lake was a bit messy and dirty with all the ducks and swans and everything, so you often had to have a bath when you came out of the lake. That the park was walled and fenced, gates shut at dusk and opened in the early morning, no cycling, motor vehicles never allowed, and park attendants patrolled not only Wardown but also Pope's Meadow and People's Park, which was fenced to keep off browsing cows from wandering onto Havelock Road and Kingston Road. Yes, swimming we've been into. And anyway, used for a variety of things, really. I hope with the lottery bid that some of it, people will enjoy the park when it's been refreshed. Now the tank was presented to the town in recognition of the support given to the war savings movement in the First World War. And it was decided eventually that it should be placed in Wardown Park, but there was, as always, discussion about this. It was suggested that it should be put on a concrete base with its nose in the air, so this added to its appearance, and be placed in the park near the centre gate, New Bedford Road. It was first going to be placed in the moor, but Councillor Escott thought the tank would spoil the promenade under the trees in New Bedford Road, which was very nice in the summer, and that the park would be the best place for it. Alderman Wilkinson suggested the old village green at Round Green as the most suitable site, and one where the tank would harmonise with its surroundings. Now, if you can tell me how having a tank harmonises with Round Green, I don't know. So, presumably, where the chestnut tree once was, which did harmonise, you might have had the tank. It caused all sorts of fuss when it came. It said it would be ungallant. The newspaper, Luton News, on February 19th, 1920, reported that tank arrived in town a week ago and was yesterday the subject of some unexpected excitement at Wardown. The old proverb, man proposes, and it would be ungallant to suggest that the contrariness which this tank exhibited was only to be expected from a female tank, which was a female tank apparently. But the fact remains that after being formally presented to the town and accepted, this good female jibbed at the job, climbed a little way up the stand and then refused to budge. We understand that it suffered from some inward complaint, which could be cured in 10 minutes. And members of the crew hammered and tinkered about inside for a very liberal 10 minutes. When they came out into the oven, they smiled quite happily about their job, but inside they laboured and perspired. Some of the visitors got tired of waiting and went away. But those who stayed got a little more excitement for nothing. The tank decided to climb a bit further up the slope, then bang. Now, the engine backfired, the carburettor and petrol behaved as nastily as it can do. The interior of the tank quickly became a raging furnace, and it was lucky for the tank corps men inside that there were side shutters, that they were able to get out and rescue their coats and caps. One man was slightly burned on the hand, everybody else seemed okay. Another man was a bit worried because he thought his pay packet was inside the tank and he found it in his jacket. And there were frequent little explosions. Top of the tank was used as a platform. When it quietened down, the top of the tank was used as a platform, and even the mayoress and Mrs. Durrant ventured up the ladder to stand on the tank, also the mayor's little grandson. And it was duly presented to the town. Apparently tanks are two types, male and female. Male tanks were used for attacking pillboxes and concrete emplacements. The female tanks were armed with machine guns, and their function was to keep the enemy down. The mayor accepted the tank and hoped that Luton raised something over £1 million to help the government finance the war, and that he hoped future generations would be at peace. And then eventually, of course, the tank was scrapped. And then during the Second World War, you might remember that tanks were actually tested in the water.
They used to call
Yeah.
ducks,
Yeah.
didn't they, to go
Yeah.
through.
So you can see the ramps going down into the lake where they were tested. But by, and then in recent times the park as we see it now. I think mainly the lottery money is actually going into, yes, the replanting, some more railing being added. They're probably going to put an entry barrier up Old Bedford Road entrance, because there is some trouble late at night with cars going around. And features that will sort of enhance the park and bring back some of the original atmosphere. And then hopefully it'll be good for at least another 100 years after that. But it seems amazing now that people thought it was too far out of town and nobody would ever come. Whereas now it's not in town, but it's Luton's certainly expanded all around the edges. Now, anybody that would like to have a walk around the park and see where the tank was, etc., please feel free to come with me. But if you'd rather not, I'd quite understand. I'm sorry you've had it curtailed. We've talked inside rather
It's going
than
a little
outside.
dark, but I don't think it's raining.
Sorry?
It's going a little dark. There's no sign that it's windy.
Yeah. But would anybody like to come for a walk around the park?
Yeah.
Okay, should
There
we?
used to be the pedal car race as well.
Sorry?
The pedal car race.
Yeah.
Oh, was there?
Yes,
Yes.
all the companies round Luton
Yes.
used to build.
Oh, was it the apprentices? Building
That's
parks?
right.
That's
And they
right.
just
Yeah.
go round the lake.
Yes. Oh, yes.
1870 something it was taken. Right.
It was a little town band, it wasn't soldiers.
This is the map where it was divided into lots. The war trophy and the bandstand mark. And you can see the greenhouses.
What were you asking? Say about
I'm not sure what I'm doing about, but I don't know.
No, it was over there.
Over there on the on just the side of the gate, over the side of the gate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was on a man on a
Right.
Then there was the plane, wasn't there?
that's on the other side of the
Over there,
park.
yeah.
Yes.
Side of the bridge, yes, I've got that mark, but I couldn't remember whether the